It's Friday, February 21st, 2025, introducing the Friday 5-pack, some housekeeping items, and Ask or Tell Me Anything next on the AM Update. New FBI Director Kash Patel was confirmed by the Senate yesterday in a 51-49 vote. Patel said in a statement afterwards, quote, "My mission as director is clear. Let good cops be cops and rebuild trust in the FBI." Please pray for Kash Patel. Of all of the corrupt agencies in Washington, D.C. to ever corrupt, the FBI just might be the most corrupt to ever corrupt, if that ever makes sense. Pray for Kash Patel. He's got a mountain of work in front of him, and he was confirmed yesterday by the Senate in a 51-49 vote. Yesterday at CPAC, Vice President J.D. Vance maybe shared more gospel in about 2 minutes than Mike Pence ever did in 4 years.
First is, I believe the fundamental tenet of the Christian faith, it's not just a set of good moral principles, though it is that. I think the fundamental tenet of our faith is that the Son of God became man, he died, and then he raised himself from the dead. That is the fundamental tenet of the Christian faith, and I think so much flows from that. And
forget 2 minutes, try 20 seconds. More gospel in 20 seconds from the vice president than Mike Pence, the evangelical of all evangelicals, probably shared in about 4 years during his stint as vice president. Over back in the Senate, Mitch McConnell made this announcement. He's not long for this Senate.
Our Commonwealth has been the honor of a lifetime. I will not seek this honor an 8th time. My current term in the Senate will be my last.
Give the devil his due. You don't last that long in Washington, D.C. without some level of skill, cunning, and ruthlessness, all traits that Mitch McConnell, for ill or for better, not very many times for the better, unfortunately, has possessed, and he is now making it official. This is his last stint in the Senate. Over at the White House, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt had this to say, recapping the last few weeks of the new Trump White House.
The president has taken questions from the press, all of you, nearly every single day, sometimes on multiple different occasions in the same day, on any topic any of you wish to talk about. President Trump set the tone on this approach immediately when he took more than 12 times the questions in his first few hours in office, as Joe Biden did in his entire first week.
Not even going to bother to fact check that. That is obviously correct. That is obviously correct. It was Inauguration Day, and he was just holding court with the media like he does this every day, because that's what he does. Finally, I would submit this, number 5 in our Friday 5-pack. For a clip of the week, keep in mind, Jasmine Crockett, the congresswoman, she this week came out and said about the proposed Doge dividend, what the heck can people do with $5,000? I don't know how that helps anybody. All right, the Democrats as a whole have been attacking Doge, which is very popular. You know, just tackling the size of government and saving money. That's a very popular concept, and Democrats have been attacking that for weeks now. Keep that in mind when you hear from Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana. This is the clip of the week. Some unsolicited advice for Democrats.
Look, you just got to try harder not to suck. I mean, think about it. Over the past 4 years, the Democrats mismanaged Congress, they mismanaged COVID, they mismanaged the economy, they mismanaged inflation, they mismanaged the national debt, they mismanaged Afghanistan. More recently, in their opposition to President Trump and Mr. Musk, the Democrats have chosen to support the bureaucrats and the spending porn over the American taxpayer.
So there's John Kennedy, senator from Louisiana, with some unsolicited advice to the Democrat Party. Just try not to suck. Agreed. Now let's get to some housekeeping. Welcome to all of our new listeners. Fridays on the AM Update are a little different speed. It's your chance to tell me what's happening in your neck of the woods, or ask me any question you'd like. You can, every Wednesday, look for the pinned tweet at Real AM Update on X for the solicitation of Ask or Tell Me Anything Fridays. Oftentimes, by the way, on the Friday edition, I tape with my kids around, so you may hear from them from time to time. Nevertheless, you do come here for news, so starting with what you just heard from this point forward on Fridays, I'll have a little Friday 5-pack of quick hitters, sound bites or stories that we can't just let the weekend lapse from our memory banks. Number 2, a few of you may have noticed last Sunday I debuted the AM Update Week in Review. The way I format this show every day is to have 15 minutes worth of news stories, briefly touching or commenting on each. Usually that number is 7 to 11 stories, and then 10 to 15 minutes of longer form commentary after those quick news hitters for those of you who have a longer commute. If you missed the latter part of the AM Update, don't worry. AM Update Week in Review recaps pretty much everything. Much slower pace, much less in your face, and a good product for Sundays. No Suck Saturday returns tomorrow. Me and my wife Bella are back with 5 good news stories, inspirational stories, and a discussion of C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity and more. No Suck Saturday returns tomorrow, and it is now for everyone. For those of you who subscribe to the premium tier on Apple Podcasts, you get the ad-free AM Update experience you previously received. No Suck Saturday as a subscriber exclusive. Well, that latter part is going to be available for the Gen Pop. Everybody can listen to it now. You can still have everything ad-free, but if that causes you to unsubscribe from the $5 a month premium tier, totally understand. Many have asked about Megyn Kelly's new podcast. She also named AM Update, and that's where we're going to begin. Ask or Tell Me Anything. Tim asks, what was your lawyer's advice on the podcast name issue? Well, I'm just going to say this. I have no plans nor intent to change the name of the AM Update, which is a podcast that I established back in February of 2023. Let's go to Redacted next. You likely can't use it for the podcast. Yes, I can, due to language, but it's something I see way too often on social media. Observation, the term chuckle bleeps, F-word, chuckle F-words, is one of the biggest liberal tells ever. I've never seen a single right-wing, MAGA, conservative, etc. use that term, but the college-educated left seems to love and overuse the term to a weird degree. Again, don't need to put it on the podcast, but I'm hoping someone in the audience has seen it too, and I'm not just losing my mind. Dude, I have not seen that ever. But that does sound like something that completely out-of-touch, lefty, college-educated, just numbnuts. It's probably something it sounds like they get a kick out of themselves. So I've never heard that term before. Have any of you? Let Redacted know in the thread at Real AM Update for Ask or Tell Me Anything. The Sniper says, what happens if Trump goes to Fort Knox and it turns into Geraldo Rivera's Al Capone's vault moment? There's going to be a very long pause, and then somebody somewhere is going to say very loudly, uh-oh. I think that's what's going to happen. I mean, what are the possibilities of that? Let's try to put a sober, honest number. And I'm not joking here. Chances Doge or Trump, Elon, somebody goes to audit Fort Knox. The chance that Fort Knox is, let's just say, half empty from what they expected. I'm putting the chances at no lower than 5 to 10%. No lower than 5 to 10%. And maybe I'm being way too generous with the federal government by even putting it there. Exponentially Charles has this, maybe a challenge to Lindsey Graham. I don't know anything about the guy, yet here's hoping that he's good and a change is in the works. This comes from WYFF TV. Here's the story headline. Upstate businessman looks to challenge Senator Graham in upcoming election. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham will have at least one primary challenger in the upcoming election. Mark Lynch announced his candidacy this week, stating he will run as a Republican. Graham, who served in the Senate since 2003, is up for re-election next year. Lynch previously ran for South Carolina State Senate District 12 in 2020, but lost in the Republican primary. So at least Graham is getting a challenger. That story courtesy of WYFF TV in South Carolina. Have you heard of this guy before? He's a businessman from upstate Carolina by the name of Mark Lynch. Never heard of him before? Hopefully he is an upgrade and at least an alternative for voters in South Carolina. RC in the OC says, regarding the Doge dividend, 20% to taxpayers, 20% to paying down national debt. I don't know where the remaining 60% is going. Would take it out of circulation to address inflation? That's a good question. I didn't even consider that yesterday when we talked about that story. That's a great question. Actually, that's a great idea, too. Just take it out of circulation. Just take it out of circulation, and then all of a sudden, everybody's money is worth a little bit more once you do that. So that's definitely a question that needs to be addressed. I just continue to be impressed by the political acumen of the Doge dividend. I don't know if they can pull it off. I think they're going to try, maybe. They might get stopped in the courts. They might. But that's, it's the political instincts there are really good. Country Squire says this quote from Real Jack Hibbs. And I told the church after the election, policies are going to change, laws are going to change. With all of this victory, not one heart has been changed by this victory. I think God gave us a little pause to see if the church will step up and evangelize. Absolutely. This is not just a time to sit back and enjoy the wins. And believe me, I am. But this is a time, unlike maybe any time in my lifetime, to truly evangelize, not just evangelize, but disciple. So Jack Hibbs is right on the money there, in my estimation. Ricky Helm says, great job with While We Were Away segments. I'm curious to know if you guys have thought about following up on the drone stories, especially the Matthew Livelsberger story. I'm not sure how quickly it just got swept under the rug. Something stinks here. What are you talking about? Who is this Matthew Livelsberger you speak of? You know, Ricky, I'm going to do some checking into that over the weekend. And maybe for an air analysis next week, that would probably be a good idea to follow up with. So thank you, Ricky. JFP or JPF West says federal employees should blame Biden for losing their jobs. See Spicer v. Biden. Haven't heard of that, but that's an interesting story. When we come back, a follow-up on a question I was asked last week with a little bit more specific undergirding and a specific answer. That's coming up next. Back for one final segment on the AM update this weekend. We go back to Ryan the Christo-fascist, who has this. He asked a similar question last week. I was a little bit confused upon the context, but he's putting a little bit more meat on the bones as far as what he was asking. And I asked you, Ryan, earlier this week to ask this follow-up because there's a lot more to say. Ryan says, pertaining to my question on the last Ask Me Anything, this is closer to what I was driving at when asking, why does the church not confront the sins more prevalent to women? Can you please elaborate on what you think this is and what do you think the fallout would be if confronted? And he has this X post from J. Chase Davis, who's a good follow on X. Many evangelical churches seem to tailor their evangelism efforts primarily toward liberal women. This informs what they teach, how they teach it, their musical style, their graphic design, and who they choose to criticize. So, Ryan, you're right. This does provide a little bit more context. I'm going to tell you a story. When I was in college studying radio, I went to the University of Northwestern St. Paul. That's in the Twin Cities, and it's a good school. At the time that I went there, and a little bit before I went there, they were having some issues that you see Wheaton College have right now. My understanding is that the newest administration that took over a couple of years ago, much more conservative, and I've heard nothing but good things since then. But that's neither here nor there. Just giving you a little bit of a background on where I went to school. Anyway, I went there to study radio, which you can't do anymore, which is good, but I don't think anybody should be able to get a degree in radio in the year 2025. But the main radio professor, my favorite professor, really great man of God, loved Jesus, loved theology. I'm saying loved as if he's still, as if he's dead, but no, he's still alive. Just a great individual, and really loved his students. And one of the things that he would teach his students is that in the world of broadcasting, you are taught that you as a broadcaster are orbiting the S-U-N sun. The sun. And the sun is the audience, meaning that you as a broadcaster are in the solar system as a planet, orbiting the audience and reflecting what the audience is radiating towards you back towards them, because that's what they want. And he said, what's different for a Christian broadcaster, a broadcaster who is Christian, is that you are to orbit the sun, yes, but it's the S-O-N. The audience is the rest of the planets in that solar system, and you are to reflect the Son of God's light to them. That's hard to do in broadcasting. Now, this would rankle some of the people upstairs. The radio program, the media program at Northwestern, was in the Mel Johnson Media Center, still is to this day. And the lower two floors, the first floor and the basement, were all classrooms. It was all for students. But the second floor were for the radio stations, a very prominent radio network in the upper Midwest, Christian radio network. Both talk and teaching, that was on the AM side, and then music on the FM side. His professor's teachings, as I understand it, I never really got the full story. They didn't tell students, but kind of reading between the lines, he would rankle the feathers of the people upstairs, the people running the radio networks. Because inevitably, The people that they hire the most up there were Northwestern students somehow, some way, whether it was actually upstairs or at one of their satellite affiliates all across the upper Midwest. He would rankle their feathers, especially on the music side, because on the music side, they had a little bit different philosophy of broadcasting. Their philosophy was developing an archetype of the listener that they are trying to reach. Now, that in and of itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, but the degree to which that was taken, not exactly a good thing. And this is prevalent in Christian, especially music radio, developing an archetype, and then not only developing an archetype, but giving that archetype a name. In one instance, that name was Linda. Linda was a single mom on her way from dropping the kiddos off to or from soccer practice. She may be a single mom, may be married, may be frustrated in her marriage, but she just wants to feel good when she's in the car and she's stressed. And Linda is who you're trying to reach as a broadcaster in Christian music radio. Could be Linda, could be Rebecca, could be Jenny, but that is the archetype that they're trying to reach. You can kind of see the problem here. Now, having an archetype of somebody that you're trying to reach with a message, that's probably something that's prevalent in missions work. But it was the way that it was handled and the degree to which you focused really your life and your work around Linda. Oh, I don't think Linda would like us to talk about that. Oh, did you think that would resonate with Linda? Oh, that might just, Linda's really stressed right now. I don't know if we can really go there. Does Linda really want to hear about that? So Ryan, to answer your question, and to piggyback on J. Chase Davis, this is the same thing. The churches, instead of being a prophetic voice in a hospital for sinners, have instead decided to create their own archetype of whom they are trying to reach. It's a Linda. This is who we're trying to reach. I would submit to you, and this is not, I'm not saying anything that's necessarily, I don't think it's offensive or anything. As the fairer sex, I think the tendency over the last 40, 50, 60 years, as I said last week, that's the overarching thing, is that churches have been worked over by feminism, but it's just easier and less threatening if you want Linda to be the person sitting in your pews. Linda is the person that you're molding and shaping everything, the aesthetic of the church around Linda. Less threatening. The fairer, softer sex. I think it's just a case of cowardice. We're afraid to tailor services. We're afraid to tailor aesthetics around men because that might get sticky. It might get confrontational. And that makes me uncomfy. That's my working hypothesis. So there's a longer answer to a more fleshed out question, Ryan. Thank you for following up. And those are my thoughts. And that will do it for this week on the AM Update. Again, like I said, tomorrow morning, going to be No Suck Saturday. Bella and I are back at it. And then on Sunday, it's going to be the second edition of the AM Update Week in Review. Looking forward to seeing all of you this weekend. For everybody else, back at it again on Monday.